This is the College Hockey News Insiders Podcast.
Wilmer behind the back, spinorama, he scores! What a goal by Jeremy Wilmer!
Discussion.
Into the net with a shot, he scores! Owen Mike goes 4-2, Western Michigan.
Opinion.
Back into the near circle, fires, he scores! Hysteria here in Hockey Valley as Penn State upsets number 2 Minnesota.
Special guests and your listener questions.
The icing is waved and it's over! Western Michigan has won it. The Broncos are the Frozen Four champions of 2025.
Taking you through the world of college hockey, here are your hosts, Adam Roden and Mike McMahon.
Welcome. Here we are as we get into the latter portion of January with everything taking shape here and some teams still jockeying for position. It's never a dull moment around here, and here we are again. What's going on?
Not much. I was in Buffalo over the weekend, so
Sure, that was an enjoyable drive.
it wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't too bad. We snuck back on Saturday, which was unfortunate for my son's team. That meant they were out of the playoffs on Sunday, but we were able to sneak back on Saturday. I was hoping to catch a college game. I was going to go to RIT Canisius on Friday night, but he ended up having a 7:00 game, so we weren't able to catch it. But yeah, that was my weekend. Back and forth to Buffalo. Put about 1,500 miles on my car.
Hey, I don't want to hear it. I just went back and forth from Denver to Buffalo, so that was like 3,000 miles at least. So yeah. Anyway, no, I know it. Thankfully, we didn't hit much. That was a couple weeks ago. So, but I know what was it yesterday? I was watching, both football games. It was snowing at in Boston and Chicago. So that was interesting. While I was up in the mountains here in Denver, so it was not really snow. It's funny because they haven't had any snow like for 2 months, so everyone's freaking out up at the mountains here in Denver, and you can't even make snow unless you have water.
That's true,
and there hasn't even been any of that. So, yeah, it's been crazy. But
we got snow here. I'm outside of Boston, and we got snow here yesterday. And I think I saw someone may correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I saw that this was the first 5+ inch snowstorm in some areas around here since 2022.
Wow.
Which is, I know it hasn't snowed a ton, but I wouldn't have guessed 4 years.
Yeah, right. Well, usually up in the mountains here, they get deluged, but there's been nothing. So props up the entire ski industry. But hey, whatever. Breckenridge is still a beautiful town, whether you ski or not. So I was fine with it because I don't feel like killing myself or anyone else. But my wife skis and she did fine. So. Good enough. Anyway, the week that was. Our team of the week is Providence. The Friars have had quite the interesting season. As you can check out the article on collegehockeynews.com. They've been inconsistent, let's just say, early in the season. Fairly young team, especially up front. And then, as their season was on the brink, they lost to Alaska 2 weeks ago, and Philip Svedback, their goaltender for basically all 4 years, gets hurt. And what happened since then? They've won 4 in a row, including this past weekend against Boston College. First one in overtime, and then back at home 4-3. So, that's quite the story, thinking about that. Turning things around there after losing. But Jack Parsons, he's no slouch. I think that's showing right now.
Yeah, that was my biggest thing, right, is Jack Parsons was pretty highly recruited. I didn't think he was going to come in and struggle. He's come in and played really well. But when you look at just his track record, you would think that, okay, this is a guy that can certainly play at this level. He was a potential draft pick. He wasn't drafted last year, but or 2 years ago, but a potential draft pick out of Mount St. Charles, played for the National Development Program, had a pretty good year for the Chicago Steel last year. So, there was plenty of evidence that he'd be able to play pretty well for them right away. And let's be honest, Philip Svedback has been consistent for them over the last couple of years, but I wouldn't say that he has stolen games. He's been good for them. He's been very good, but he hasn't. I don't think he's had a stretch at the level that Yegorov has had, like that he had for BU at the end of last year, or Jacob Fowler has had for BC. Not that it was easy to replace that, but you weren't looking for someone to come in and give you 940 goaltending. You were looking to have someone come in and give you a good solid 910, and I think Parsons can do that, and so far he has done that.
Yeah, exactly. And remember last year they, I believe, lost in the Hockey East quarterfinals to UConn and still made the NCAA tournament and then lost to Denver 5-1 in the first round. So, that's been it in the last 6 years. Providence always seems to be right around, hovering around, but haven't made it a lot lately. And this year, a lot was expected of them with, Svedbeck coming back and, they signed the first rounder, NHL first rounder, Roger McQueen, one of the many major junior guys to make the leap here, but coming late in the summer. So that was obviously a big boost. And he is their leading scorer, point-wise. But
took him a while to get going, but he's there now, yeah.
I mean, they don't have a lot, it's not a big-time offense right now, but they're, like I said, their forwards are pretty young. And Friday against BC, it was their fourth line that did all the offense. And then Logan Sawyer scored in overtime. He scored also on Saturday. But both 4-3 games, but Nate Lehman thought that Saturday's game was much more complete. I mean, if you look at it, BC had 46 shots in Friday's game. And then Saturday was a lot more even. But they did have to kill off 2 5-minute majors, including one in the last few minutes, where BC scored a goal 5 seconds after the 5-minute major started to cut it to 4-3, but then didn't score again. That was like in the last 3 minutes of the game. So, they're number 12 in the NPI now. They got BU coming up the next, Helmand home the next weekend. And that's another huge weekend for BU's 18, and they're struggling to crawl back into it.
Yeah, all of a sudden now, you start to look at the NPI, and I know that nothing is happening as of today, but BC barely in as a second Hockey East team. They're at 15 right now, so they would be in if favorites all won in the conference tournament. And there's a couple others flirting, like you said, BU, I think with that Harvard result that just went in, actually up to 17.
Right.
So they're up, and that game literally just ended seconds ago as we're recording this. So BU up to 17, UConn at 19, Northeastern at 21. I mean, you got a couple of other teams flirting there right around the bubble. And as we saw this weekend, BC actually ends up creeping in to moving up 2 spots from 17 to 15 with 2 losses, which is because everyone else around them also lost, and their losses essentially weren't as bad as other teams. But all of a sudden, Hockey East is, look, I don't think they're going to get 4. I don't even think they're going to get 3, but there's a chance they could get 2. And for a while there, it was looking like they were only going to get 1. So things are looking better for Hockey East than it did a month ago, but still not nearly where it's usually been.
Yeah, just to be clear, Harvard over Union 4-0. BU was not involved in that game, but Harvard's win just boosts BU a little bit because they just recently played. And so there you go.
And there's not a lot of separation. Like if you look at the NPI number for BC at 15 all the way down to UConn at 19, not a lot. We're talking 0.0 or 0.6 points in the NPI only separate those 5 teams. So one result, even if it doesn't include one of those teams, could flip some things because it's a razor thin margin amongst that group.
Well, one of the teams to make a big leap back up this past week was Michigan State, because they had dropped to 6 and then swept Wisconsin on the road. So that was probably the biggest other series as far as 2 really good teams going at it. And, kudos to Michigan State, I guess, for righting the ship a little bit and going to Madison and winning 2 games, which is not easy. So they had, it's not like they were doing poorly before that, but they had lost to Ohio State the previous game. They lost to Michigan that was before the break, and going down there and winning those games is pretty huge.
Yeah, and it's funny because they traded sweeps. Wisconsin swept them in East Lansing back in November. So the teams traded sweeps with the road team picking up the sweep on both sides.
Yes. Elsewhere in the Big Ten, since we're there, Michigan playing without Jack Ivankovic now, and they made life pretty easy, I guess, for their backup. Stephen Peck, who is thrown into this assignment now, at least the first night. I mean, they went at 5-1 and outshot Minnesota 52-18,
Oof.
including 22-2 in the third period. Usually when you're ahead 3-1 on the road, you expect the home team to make a push, but Michigan outshot them 22-2 in the third period. So yeah, that was a big win for Michigan. But Minnesota, I give them credit. This year is kind of as we've said, a rebuilding year in a sense. But they did come back the next night and play much better. The shots were still a big difference, but it was not as big a difference. It was 48-28. Michigan winds up winning in overtime. Minnesota got a pair of power play goals as Stephen Peck again was in there. So, Michigan's still firmly number one in the league in NPI. Their goal differential is ridiculous. I read somewhere that it's the largest goal differential they've had, through 20-something games since their 1997 team, which was fairly historic. It went wire to wire until losing the semifinals to BU. But they won the national championship the year before and the year after. But that 97 team was stacked, that's for sure. So, yeah, no guarantees.
And the thing, too, like I saw, having watched some of those games and just even some clips from earlier in the weekend, they seem to, I know this is going to sound weird because they put up over 100 shots, or they put up exactly 100 shots in two games, but it seemed to me that they were more committed defensively and more committed to puck possession, not taking as many chances, I think, offensively, where things would come back the other way at Stephen Peck and try to limit the odd man rushes coming the other way. You look at, and I know like some of these models are not always perfect, but I like looking at expected goals. They only allowed, coming into this weekend, going back to Thanksgiving, they had only allowed under 3 expected goals in a game once, and it was the game at Michigan State on December 5th. The weekend before, when Ivan Kovac got hurt, their expected goals against were 4.6. Notre Dame had 4.6 on Friday, 5 expected goals even on Saturday. And this weekend, 1.9 on Friday night, 2.7 on Saturday night. Again, a lot of that due to the big shot disparity, but also I think you saw Michigan put a premium on possessing the puck. It's why they had so many shots, but it's also, I think it was done in an effort to limit Minnesota's chances, specifically those ones coming the other way. You want to try to make it easier, your goaltender, don't give up a lot of 2-on-1s. And sometimes when you are super creative and super skilled the way that Michigan is, you can make some plays, you make some high danger plays that maybe you convert like 60% of them, but 40% of the time it can lead to some chances going the other way. That's where Jack Ivankovic can bail you out. It didn't seem like they were much more careful, much more meticulous, more surgical in their approach this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. And they have the weekend off, and then they go to Ohio State for 2. So, and then it's the big weekend with Michigan State, the first week of February, where that Little Caesars Arena game in Detroit is on February 7th. So, but just poking around the country here for some storylines. I mean, I hate to bring up a negative one just because I love the program so much, but man, St. Lawrence has lost. They haven't won since November 7th, and they've lost their last 4 games now by combined 21-3. So not looking any better there, unfortunately. It pains me to say, to be honest, but it is what it is. I mean, elsewhere in the ECAC, Cornell's been having a strong year. They finally lost their first home game. Quinnipiac handled them pretty good, 4-1. It looked, they were right at the top of the ECAC standings and the NPI. I think they were 9-10 going into the weekend. And, both teams won Friday. But if you looked at the underlying metrics, Quinnipiac was well ahead of Cornell in a number of categories. And so it's not that surprising. I mean, even though they were kind of neck and neck at the time. And I think there's going to be, a little bit of separation there. I mean, right now Cornell's 11, now Quinnipiac's 9, Dartmouth is 8. That's 3 CAC teams right there. Princeton has fallen down to 25. So, I mean, that run that they had was solid, but now kind of well out of the picture as far as the NCAAs, and Harvard is hovering there at 20. So, but that's the ECAC. I noticed Mercyhurst won again twice. against Niagara. So they actually had a sweep. They had their first win of the year not too long ago, and then now they sweep Niagara, which kind of surprised me. I mean, I know we don't focus a lot on Atlantic hockey that much, but, Niagara has had a relatively decent season. I mean, they beat Bowling Green earlier in the year. They've had some good wins this year. So I was kind of surprised by that. But, kudos to Mercier's now 3 wins on the season.
Yeah. And Charles Edward Gravel has been fantastic, their goaltender for them. Is he a freshman? He's a freshman, yeah. I had in my head that he was older, but no, he's a freshman. But you look at this stretch, really since the second half began, going back to the beginning of November, I guess it was, only allowed 1 goal to Robert Morris. Of course, he only allowed 2 in one of those games at North Dakota. He got hurt in that game, made 46 saves, then came back the next week, had a 39-save shutout against Army. He's just been really good, and he's been really good going back to the end of November.
Mercier's has 5 goalies on their roster. 3 of them have played. Gravel playing the most. So, I guess this just means what? He's Wisconsin's starting goalie next year?
I mean, that has been the trend.
Yeah, man. Is what it is, unfortunately, for the Atlantic teams. But, so there you go. And as far as Bentley's still in first place in Atlantic hockey for anyone paying attention out there. And they've done a good job. Elsewhere around the country, back to the western side, as it were, and the NCHC, which had a weird Friday. All 3 home teams had big shutout wins. St. Cloud over Duluth, 6-0. North Dakota over Denver, 5-0. And Miami over Omaha, 3-0. And Miami sweeps Omaha. So they're, continuing to certainly, improve by leaps and bounds from where they've been. I mean, they're not making the NCAAs anytime soon. 3-7 in regulation in the NCHC play, but 7th now out of 9 in the league. So after many 9th place or last, whatever it is, finishes, some hope of that not being the case this year.
Yeah, those scores on Friday were weird. I noticed that just going through some games on Friday night. They were all big disparities, big shutouts, but that happens sometimes. Yeah. That happens sometimes.
Well, yeah.
What's going on? I mean, you've seen Denver closer than at least I have. I've watched their games on TV. I haven't been able to catch them in person yet this year. I know they won on Saturday, but what do you think was the reason for their little slide beginning of the year here?
Yeah, I mean, we mentioned it last week that if they're not careful, going to North Dakota and this little slide that they're on, they could slip out. I mean, I think they went to 13 after losing on Friday, back to 10 now after winning. On Saturday, 3-2, they eked that one out. I mean, they were outshot 35-17. North Dakota had the better of play for the first 2 periods for sure, but Denver pulled it out with a power play goal in the 3rd period. And, I mean, I don't know. I mean, the schedule's tough, right? So it's
100%, yeah.
That's obviously part of it. I mean, I'm not to make too many excuses for them. I mean, relatively speaking, they're not having as good a year as the last couple of years, but they're always playing tough schedules. So not like a stunning shock if a couple of losses happen to get strung together. I don't think their forwards are as explosive as they've had. So, like, as a
That's
group,
what I was going to say. Like, from afar, it looks like they're good, but there's no. I mean, they had a couple of layers the last couple of years, especially those teams that were winning national titles, where it was like, geez, you went 3-4 lines deep, and any of them could score.
And as we mentioned last week, I mean, Brendan McMorrow has been out, the freshman, since he got hurt at the World Juniors, and Pat Furschweiler was singing his praises, the Western coach, about how much of a factor he's been with his speed, and him coming out now the last few games has not helped. But they have a lot of really good forwards, but not that top line quality that they've had in recent years, I would say. So it's a little bit different. But you look at the scores, and they've been losing. They've been letting up a lot of goals too. And the thing is, Quentin Miller, who's the goalie who's taken over, has been pretty good. He was, he allowed 10 goals against Western Michigan, but I thought he was really good in the games I saw. And again, 5-0 in North Dakota. Yeah, I mean, 36 shots. They get so much of their offense from their defense, with Polkamp and Buckberger especially, that maybe they're just trying to do too much offensively to compensate and getting caught. I don't know. I mean, I'd have to look at it more closely, since I'm sure the coaches know, but that's a great coaching staff. They'll get it figured out. But if I had to say the biggest difference, that's just probably at the lack of having that explosive top line.
Yeah, that's what it looks like, right? I mean, I don't see a Jack Devine or a guy that's going to put up Jack Devine level totals on the roster right now. And, it's funny. You go back to like that Denver team from even 2 years ago. Just pulling up their numbers here. A guy like McCade Webster is a guy that we didn't really talk about a lot because you could talk about Massimo Rizzo and Jack Devine and Braz and both Booyams and Carter King. Like there were plenty of forwards to talk about. Webster was kind of like a middle six forward on that team. He had 0.74 points per game. 0.74 points per game right now would make him a top 3 forward on the team.
Yeah, right.
And he was probably a middle six forward on that team a couple years ago. So it's the lack of an explosive guy up front like Devine, I think, and then also maybe not having the forward depth that they had a couple of years ago. But they are young too. Caswell's a younger guy. He's a freshman, and he's still, he's going to be 20. The next point he scores will be his 20th of the year, and so it seems like it's just they're a little bit younger up front, maybe, and of course now. In today's era, it's can you hang on to those guys? Denver has the ability to hang on to them.
Yeah.
They don't lose many guys in the portal, but if it was a program not named Denver, or a select handful of others, I think when you're building through youth like that, your concern is whether or not you can keep them. I would assume that Denver is going to be able to, though.
Yeah, and then they get the next 4 games at home, St. Cloud, and then Duluth. So this is make or break time for them, but I'll never count them out of anything. So,
yeah, there's certain teams. I joke about this a lot, but there's certain teams that, as long as the guy behind the bench is there, I just assume they're going to be competitive. David Carl in Denver's one. Nate Lehman in Providence is another. I was joking about it within the realm of Atlantic hockey. Andy Jones and Bentley now is up there for me too because I thought Bentley would struggle this year. Right now they're the highest ranked Atlantic hockey team in the MPI. So there's certain teams where it's that I don't care what their roster looks like. That staff, that guys behind the bench, they're going to figure it out. They're going to figure out a way.
Yep. Absolutely agree. I mean, that doesn't mean it's going to ever come easy or always come easy, but you have faith that they'll figure it out. But they do have to be careful here because, like I said, the schedule's tough, and you lose a few games, you can slip off the bubble, and then you never know. So a lot of good teams in college hockey, So
there are
teams 15 through 25 are very competitive, good teams. So anyway, all right, we'll get to our chat here. I've been kind of saving this in the bank here for a few weeks, but caught up with Jim Madigan, former Northeastern coach and AD now at Northeastern when he was doing all the Matthews Arena stuff. So finally going to run that back for you here. We'll come back on the other side.
Class, today we're talking men's ice hockey. Open your textbooks. Join thousands of other screaming fans for an in-person experience you have to see to believe. It's the NCAA Men's Frozen 4, April 9th and 11th in Las Vegas. Attendance is encouraged. Passion is mandatory. Buy your seats today at ncaa.com/mfrozen4.
How many teams are in the Men's Frozen 4?
Please leave.
Just wanted to catch up. I know you've been busy with all the festivities. I mean, how are you finally able to take a breath?
You know what? And you're right. It's been hectic. It's been great. But I think I'll take an exhale, on Tuesday. There's still so much there's so much that you haven't been able to attend to, because the focus has been on the last, on the building. So, we're attending to some of those things that need to be addressed. But, the excitement level, Adam, as you know, just carries you through it, right? I mean, you're kind of running on adrenaline.
Yeah. I guess some people are like, well, you get so emotional over a building, but I mean, it really is. I know how it is with my favorite teams growing up, and when they changed buildings and whatnot. I mean, it's just how was the emotions of that and handling all that?
The emotions I was able to keep in check up until if you listen to the speech, when I last said farewell and goodbye, and that's when it just comes through you, and I had a flashback to the first time I went into the building, 1981 as a freshman with my mom and dad, and it was like, oh my God. And then, and this is the finality of it, right? And to your point though about, how do you get emotional about a building? And it's because it's not just bricks and mortar. It's just not a building. It's everything that brought us together. The building brought us together, Adam, in so many different ways. And I was fortunate over my 45 years to be involved, not just in hockey games or basketball games, but university events. I was working for facilities when we put on the Nancy Kerrigan show, right? Which was made for TV, and it was for her comeback after she got, hit, as we know, leading into the Olympics. So that was a huge thing. I've been involved. We've had boxing events in there, university events for, celebrations for advancement. So I've been fortunate. And so it's where people come together, and that's the building brought us together. And that's where the emotion, the memories, and the moments, come from.
Yeah. It's just, I was seeing that picture you guys I just talked to Dick Umeli a couple days ago. He was just telling me about last Monday and just everyone being there. That was just amazing, seeing everybody all in one place, So
let's stay with that. We had, 42 coaches were invited. Not everyone showed. The majority of people showed. But, the people that were invited represent 557 years of coaching and over 9,400 wins. We had 2,000 wins just with Parker and York alone, right?
Right.
Then you throw Umili in there, and you throw Brian DeRocher on the women's side, right? David Flint on the women's side. It's like we're talking 300-400. Then you got Billy Cleary, who, coach, who, Teddy was there, and Teddy just beat Billy the night before. But Teddy, Billy represents, he's on Mount Rushmore with
absolutely.
Parker and York. It's like, I'm still trying to see who the fourth is, but, and Cleary's talking about stories when he played in there, but when he refereed in there, right?
Right.
Timmy Flynn is there, whose father was Bill Flynn, the longtime athletic director, along with Lou, formed Hockey East. And he's bringing up stories, recalling stories his dad told him in 1930 when BC's home rink was there and playing in the building.
Well, I need to talk to him because I love that history,
too. The other one is Billy and Paul Stewart. Paul Stewart, the former ref. Your grandfather was the first American to win a Stanley Cup as a coach. He was in there in 1919. The building was only 9 years old then.
Yeah.
It's like, so that, I'm a sponge for that. Tell me more, So the Jack Parker, Jack never played a game on Boston University's campus, right? Never did. They were all at the arena, you know?
And plus in high school, all the high school stories. Dickie was telling me, you grew up in Canada, but for those guys, like freshman high school teams were playing.
Yeah. And Jack talks about going to Jack Garrity's hockey school. Garrity was a former BU guy, right? But hockey school before high school, probably, at the arena. Jack grew up in Somerville, so it was close by. And so, the history. I listened to Jerry. I had Jerry drop the puck, ceremonial puck drop when we played BC in late October. He's talking about when he played there at BC High, and everyone has a story about the building. And it's just not a regular story from college. It goes back to high school and youth hockey. And some people talk about when they used to come in the boxing and wrestling matches in there.
Oh, I know. I saw the story someone dug up about Muhammad Ali and Babe Ruth and all this stuff, which is just insane. That's when I saw that, I was. But I got to ask you, sort of tongue in cheek, but how the heck did Mike Milbury wind up there?
So Mike's my former boss. I worked for the Islanders for 11 years.
Oh, you did? I didn't even know that. Yeah. I'm an Islander fan growing up. How did I not know that?
Yeah.
What were you doing? Were you scouting?
Yeah, I was part-time scouting in New England. I never left the university, but when I left coaching as an assistant in 93, I did 13 years with the Islanders.
Right.
11 of those with Mike of the 13, and then at 5 with Pittsburgh and we won the cup with Pittsburgh in 2009.
That I knew. I knew you did Pittsburgh, but
so Mike was my boss, and again, Mike played his high school games, and they were Walpole High School.
Yeah.
And and then the tongue in cheek was he was a college coach for a few months.
I know, but that's
never coached the game.
That's why I say, for some people, it might be a little triggering to see him there. Like, wait, what was he doing there?
But he's close with Jack all those years. Parker, and when Jack was offered the Bruin job, he was the assistant GM there with Harry. Right.
Right.
So that relationship goes, and Mike's still a fan of college hockey. And so, he was a trivia question. Who coached college hockey and was the head coach of college hockey in the NHL and had only wins in one league.
Right. Right. I know. Believe me, that was right around, like, I was just graduated from college then, so I remember that was when I was just kind of getting started, reporting. And I remember that whole thing, like that was like the big thing then. It was just crazy, that whole. And then Jerry gets the job, right, and goes on to be like a legend. So it's kind of weird how that worked out. But how did you, I'm sure you've been asked before, but like Montreal guy, like how did that all come to be then? Because a lot of these other guys, like I said, they grew up right around there. So for you, what was that? You said you first saw it in '81, right? So what was that? And Fern Flaman was the coach then?
Bernie Flaman was our head coach, exactly. I grew up in Montreal, moved to Toronto when I was 15 years of age. And I came down to Boston when I was 12, 13 for hockey exchanges. And I actually stayed with a family that was the father was a famous golfer, Paul Harney. He was on the PGA Tour, so out from Holden, Mass. So I had a little bit of, and I went into the Boston Garden back then in 72, 73 was WHA. So I had no knowledge of the arena until I came down here, but I had a couple of teammates who played at Northeastern. So I knew a little bit about, hey, it was an old building where an older building where the Bruins first played. And then, you come into the building, and it was like, cause I'd seen pictures of it, right, in media guidebooks, right? So you know what it looks like, but until you get there and you go, wow, this is like a prototypical, NHL, smaller in seating capacity, but NHL building, right? Upper balcony, lower balcony. And most college buildings, back then in the early 80s were, some had, even UNH had bleachers, right? And some just had one level of seating, and this was big, right? And you had a large, wooden ceiling. So you just get taken up by it, and there's 6,000 seats at them. And, so it was a wow factor for me, right? And the arena, I was fortunate that the school had took ownership of the building in 1979, and the first iteration of renovations happened in 81. So I was there with a brand new with brand new seats in the building, new locker rooms, new renovated areas, amenities in the building. So for me, it was just, wow, this is awesome, and a wow factor because you're, an 18-year-old coming in and so that was my first impression. My mom and dad were there and was dropping off our equipment. It was the first building I came to when I came to campus. You just want to get rid of your hockey equipment, right? Put it in the room. And, Coach Flaman and Coach McKenney were there. And
so did you ever look at like BU or anything at that point? Did you ever?
No, I got
nothing
recruited.
Else?
I went to Notre Dame and RPI on visit. So,
gotcha. RPI is pretty good too back in the day.
Oh yeah, they were really good.
But what was Fern Flaman like? I never got to meet him or anything like that. So
he was a Hall of Famer, right?
Yeah.
And had this imposing figure, right? He was. Gordie Howe called him the toughest player he ever played against, right?
Was he like that as a coach? Was he tough?
He was intimidating because of his presence,
right?
Like not tall, but like thick, and and back then you could coach differently, right? I mean, you could intimidate people a little bit more, right? But he was fair. He treated us like men because he came from the pro background. Same thing with Don McKenney. Those two had played together with the Bruins, right? They were both captains with the Bruins. Probably gave us a little bit too much rope, as college students. But we had the ultimate respect for him, and we were a little intimidated by him, right? But, he was always looking out for us. He was great. And we had the right coach at the right time, for our history with both of them.
No, I don't want to get too sidetracked on the good old days there, but I'm curious about it. I mean, did you play around? I was just looking at your schedule here from that year. The first two games were at Minnesota. You remember that?
So, I do.
Yeah.
And so we go into Minnesota, and they're big, they're strong.
Right.
They had been an NCAA tournament team the last few years. And I remember going in there as a freshman, and the building is jammed, right? It's the old Williams Arena, and there's like 7,200 people in there, and it's a unique feature in the building. And I'm going, oh my God, these guys are big, they're tough, they're fast. And the first game we lost, I was, 5-2, whatever. Second game was 3-0 because our goalie kept us in it. But it was like, oh my God, is this college hockey? And then, to think that year we actually then, went to the Frozen Four and played against North Dakota and Wisconsin, who were in the same league as them, WCHA, and beating Jerry York's Bowling Green team, right, who had 3 All-Americans on there, and Hills, McPhee, and McClellan. And so we came a long way, but, I was intimidated. You're not physically intimidated. You're just intimidated for, hey, this is the first game. And it's like, wow, am I going to be able to hang in there? And then, like anything, you settle in, right? You get used to the pace. You get used to the tempo. Things slow down in your mind and on the ice. But, yeah, those first 2 games was like, it was like, oh, my God, am I going to be able to make this, this transition?
But those Bowling Green games were at Matthews, right? So that was the big story.
Correct.
Jerry, right? I'm sure you had a lot of swapping stories on that one.
And we chatted about that. We chatted about it when he was in the building the other day. And, I mean, Hills, McPhee, and McClellan. McPhee and McClellan went on to play.
Right.
McPhee is still the president of Vegas, and McClellan just got let go as the GM for Washington. But I mean, they were unbelievable. McPhee was a Holy Baker Award that year. Right. Gary Galley was on the team. You had Elliott on the team. You had NHL guys. And we just had a hard-working team. Randy Busick, was our best player, went on to play. The only one that went on to play in the pros. But it was just a magical year for us. But, yeah, it was from Minnesota from October, and it was Halloween weekend because we started playing later back then, right? You didn't start right away. So it was Halloween weekend.
That's right, yeah.
And then, here we are then, whatever the third weekend in March playing the Nationals, and your team has matured and come a long way in a short period of time.
I'm sure it was great. So just getting back, just to keep you too long, but I was going to say, but I think you talked about this at that night, but I mean the whole, what do you call the ceremony you had with the torch and what was that? That was, I mean, I guess Montreal had done a similar thing. Is that where you got the idea from?
Yeah. So, again, growing up in Montreal and, the original 6 teams just do things, really well and special because they have history, right? It's not because they're better, than anyone. They just have history, right? So they play on the history. And, growing up, I grew up with Bruin Canadian rivalry, Adam, but I was on the other side, right? So I'm going to the Forum, the new Forum when they renovated it, in '67. I'm going there as a 6, 7, 8-year-old, 9-year-old. The Bruins would come in 70, 71, 72, and literally the city would stop. They play Saturday night, hockey night in Canada, 8:00 start. And the big bad Bruins come into town against the Montreal skilled Canadians. Yeah. And like the city's paralyzed for the whole Friday night, Saturday to Saturday night. And my dad would get tickets. We grew up in the city. I was a city kid growing up like in Dorchester to downtown, Boston. That's how I grew up. And my dad finally would, somehow get tickets. And, so the Canadians, I went to Stanley Cup parades there in '73, and, so to see when they had their farewell to the Forum celebration and bring out the Rocket and Beliveau and Emile Bouchard and go through all the names, right? Kenny Dryden's there, the whole group of it, and the torch, which is symbolic in their locker room, right? We've had a few guys play for the Canadians, and Struvel's there now. Right. Harris was there, but Chrissy Nyland and Primo were there, and Busick. They have the torch, from these hands past the flailing torch, and they got to sing. It's about the torch. Right. But it resonated more because the torch is in our university seal. Oh, right. And it's part of the university, right? So the torch, yes, I saw it as there and passing of the torch, but also because it has significance with Northeastern. So if it wasn't in our seal, I probably wouldn't have done it, as nice as it was, symbolic as it was. But it was those two colliding together that said, this makes sense for us. And it was, again, just everyone on that ice were captains, right? Yeah. And represented the decades. For the most part, they were all Hall of Famers or going to be Hall of Famers, or in the case of Jay Bell, representing his dad, who was a Hall of Famer. So you had captains, you had Hall of Famers or soon-to-be Hall of Famers, and the torch got passed, from one generation to the next, and then to your current captain, who is a Hall of Famer and waiting himself, and then he skates off, and as he skates off, he's skating off into the new building.
Yeah.
And so I thought the symbolism of it, made sense and it resonated with Northeastern.
Yeah, no, that was very, very cool. I figured that had a lot to do with your knowledge of the Canadians there. That was cool. But so obviously they couldn't just, because the new building is going to be where the old building is. So it's a little bit in that regard, you can't quite do that, right? But so what is that going to be like? I mean, I've read the articles. I kind of have a vague sense, but how long do you think that's going to take?
It's going to be, it'll be 2.5 years.
Yeah.
We'll move in, August of, fall of 28 for the 28-29 season. So fall of 28, we'll be in the building. And, are there going to be some distractions and disruptions over the next 2.5 years? Yeah. No, absolutely. We recognize that. This year, won't be as bad. It's only half a season. We played 13 home games, Adam. Both men and women are off to wonderful, first half starts. So now they, is to maintain it going through the second half. And we don't have as many games the second half of the season. So we'll manage through it. The second year will be the more challenging one because, the building is just going to start to, it's site work, right? The steel is going to be starting to be erected and all that. So, that will be more of the challenge. And then once we get to, the beginning of that third year, people are going to be excited because the new building will be enveloped, right? The walls will be there, the roof will be there. You're going to see it all coming together. So the excitement, the energy, the enthusiasm, knowing that, hey, I'm almost there. We're going to get there. And now, but what hasn't changed for us, and I've said this the other day, is that, between now and when we move in, what hasn't changed is we're still a top 50 institution in the country. We're still in Boston. We still offer a world-class education. We're still playing in, one of the top leagues in college hockey, right? In Hockey East, both in the men and women's side. We still have the Beanpot, which is a signature, event here in the city of Boston, right? In college hockey. We still have tremendous coaching staffs who focus in on development and send players to the NHL on the men's side. We've got, I think, 11 players now playing in the NHL, some who have been up and down this year, right, which could increase that number. We have women's players playing in the PWHL. The two goaltenders for Team USA are going to be goalies from Northeastern, Franco and Phillips, from the last, 2 or 3 and 4 years, 2 or 3 years. They're not far removed, right? So if you want development, we still have tremendous coaching staffs, right?
Yeah.
So, there's still a lot that we have to offer. Yes, we're going to be on the road for 2.5 years. We get it. And we'll make some opportunities with some, wonderful scheduling opportunities on the men's side. We're going to go to Belfast in the fall of 27, right? So looking for some opportunities on for the women's scheduling opportunities for signature type of events to participate in. So we'll make it the experience, a good one for the kids. And we're fortunate we've got young men and young women who have tremendous resolve and resiliency.
Well, yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you personally. I mean, I buy into all that for sure. But, I hate to sound like an old man, but kids today, the transfers, the way things work, I mean, it's like drop of a hat. Kids are coming and going, So that's going to be the challenge, I guess, for Jerry and his staff.
You're absolutely right.
I mean, it's just through no fault of anybody's, right? It's just these kids. It's just so easy for them to say, I don't want to do this. It's just a shame, but that's the way it is right now.
Yeah, and we understand that. The reality of it is that we will, we're going to lose players to the National Hockey League, like we've done, right? The last, so many years. Last year we lost 3 juniors. 2 juniors and upperclassmen, right? We lost Williams and Lund, and we lost, the goalies. Was it Whitehead? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, right. Cameron Whitehead.
Yeah, Whitehead. So, and the fourth one was Jackson Dorrington. So we lost 3 juniors and to the pros. So we're going to lose juniors to the pros, right? And so we know that. So, you're not naive to the fact that we could lose some players, to the portal. I mean, but if they look at the value still what Northeastern has to offer, the value proposition is still a very good one. But hey, we understand the landscape.
Believe me, I believe in you, but I just say, like, kids, it's just so easy for them these days. But so, by the way, I meant to ask you, did you ever meet Ken Dryden, by the way? Because you mentioned the Canadians and all that.
I have not. It's funny though. He grew up in the same town that I moved to in Toronto, called Etobicoke, and so I would, when I moved there in we moved there January of 77.
Yeah.
There was always reference to Ken Dryden and Etobicoke, right? So that was where he was from. Have I been introduced to him? Yes. So I've shook his hand. Hello, how are you? Nice to meet you. When he was the president for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I was working in the NHL, right? So
Gotcha.
I think I might have just said, hey, I'm from Etobicoke, and just that. But I've never engaged really in a conversation.
I think I interviewed him for like 15 minutes one time. But anyway, I was going to say, just to wrap, you miss coaching at all? I mean, you seem to be having fun, doing good in what you're doing, but.
The coaching part, the part that you miss in the coaching, I will say this: nothing beats being a player and having teammates, and going through, I call it a journey, right? Going through a season and ups and downs and all around, and working your way, hopefully, culminating, with some success at the end of the year, right? So that camaraderie, that interaction, that experience, nothing beats that. The second closest is coaching, right? Because you're more of the architect, right? And trying to put it together, but you're close to it. So I miss being around the coaches, miss being around the student athletes, miss seeing those freshmen come in and seeing how they mature during the course of a year, right? As young, wide-eyed, young men, and then after the first year, now they're a little more sophisticated. And then the other part is missing them, seeing their growth and maturity, Adam, from their freshman year to when they graduate, right? And they come in as young men, and then they're a man when they leave, right? They're seasoned, they're experienced, they're hardened, right? They're sophisticated, they're ready to tackle the next step in their lives, right? So that's the part that you miss because you live it, for, I was going to say for 6 months, but it's more than that, right? Because you're together for longer than the 6 months during the season, right? And so now I have that with more student athletes, but I don't have the intimacy and that daily interaction of the ups and downs, and because the hard is what makes you better, right? When you go through it.
You came in, and I don't know if this was sort of planned this way, but you hadn't really been coaching. You decided to come in almost like the program needed a boost. I mean, you did a tremendous job. You made it into a national contender. You go to 3 NCAA tournaments, and then it was like, okay, your job is done. Let's get it. It almost just seemed like you came in, you knew it was going to be brief. I mean, is that true? You knew it wasn't going to be a long time?
So you never know when you get into what the timeline is, right? And coming off of, and Greg Cronin and I were really good friends. We worked together with the Islanders, but coming off a coach who was a professional coach, right? He coached in the NHL as an assistant in the American League, right? And was going back to the NHL. And, Peter's hiring me. And I said to him years later, I don't know if I would have hired me, But so we took a chance. The first 2 years I felt bad because we hadn't been able to turn the program around, Adam. And, they were shooting at him. I was kind of like the beloved son, right? So they weren't shooting at me right away. And then, then we started getting it going. And Josh Manson, who plays for Denver, that year 3 helped turn it around. We didn't win anything other than winning advancing to the tournament and having a good season, and then set it up for us to have success.
What was the year you won in Belfast that kind of kicked you?
That was the 15-16 year, right? And we were 1-11-1, and then we ended up going 21-3-2, something like that, right? It was that. So what the landscaping was changing. So I was into year 10. Everyone had always thought that my experience pointed towards an athletic director's type of role because I'd worked at the university facilities. I'd worked in development, both, in the athletic department. I was associate dean of the business school for advancement. I knew facilities. I had been a coach. I'd been a player. So a lot of those experiences could lead you to an athletic director's role. And I was happy coaching. We had a great staff. 2 things happened. Jerry Keefe was ready to move on.
You didn't want to lose him, right?
Move on to be a head coach, exactly. And the athletic director's role opened up. So the timing of it just worked out extremely well. And there wasn't a long, arduous process. The president basically came to me through, a member of the leadership team saying, "Are you interested?" I was on a Saturday, and by, Tuesday, I was in the seat. It happened that quickly. And so now we're able to retain Jerry. And I was always worried, Adam, about relevancy. And I was approaching 60. And as you know, you're not coaching 18-year-olds and 19-year-olds. You're recruiting 15-year-olds, right?
Yeah, right?
So am I relevant? I still thought I was, but
right.
but at some point, my relevancy was going to diminish. Jerry's son was still of that age, right? So he was younger. He could connect. And as I said, I thought I was connecting with young men. But I knew there was that window was closing. And if you looked at my background at Northeastern, I was an assistant coach for 7 years here. I was in facilities for 6 years. I was in athletic development for 4, another 7 years in the business school development. So I was fortunate to have a lot of mentors that moved me around the university because they thought that was a good fit and could contribute in different ways. And then Peter was the same thing. He thought I could contribute, as a head hockey coach, and and we were fortunate. I mean, I was fortunate to have a good staff with Jerry and the coaches that allowed us to have.
Well, you might have gotten out just in time, because I've seen a lot of my old guys who I love just get so frustrated with the current landscape of things. So you're an AD, so you have some not say in the matter. I don't think any of us have any say in what's kind of steamrolled through here, but at least you have a broader perspective of it, what's going on. But
well, and I do, and the game's changing. I can, and it doesn't matter what my opinions are, good, bad, indifferent. It is what it is, right? This is the new landscape. So if you don't adjust, if you don't adapt and adopt it, then you fall behind, right? And philosophically, no, a lot of us aren't there, right? But it doesn't matter where we are philosophically. It's like, hey, if we want to be competitive, we got to be involved in NIL, revenue sharing. We got to. That's the name of the game.
I would like to think that, Congress could sort of rein it in a little bit, at least get some kind of just the rules behind all of this, like not the Wild West, but I don't at this point trust Congress to do anything. So I guess I won't hold my breath. You know what I mean? That would be ideal.
You just said Bonner, right? Like Bonner I played against, right? Bonner's an Ottawa guy. He's, a couple of years younger, but all those St. Lawrence guys, Ray Shiro, who was very, very close with me, right? And Randy Sexton, there's so many of us, but Bonner got out of it. I mean, Shake gets out of it. Years ago, he could have gone another 5 years. I mean, Keith Elaine, right? Keith Elaine, who I was just with, right? I mean, another real good coach, right? And, that's my group. I mean, Keith's a couple of years older than me, probably 3, 4, but, we're all, Shake's my age. Donnie's a year or two older, and it's changed out.
Again, when I got to Ithaca Cornell, Don Vaughn and Mike Schaefer were the two assistant coaches. So that was my formative years. But anyway,
the old coach there, Brian.
Brian McCutcheon. Yeah.
So Brian's from Toronto area, right? And so my mom would skate with Brian's dad. And my mom's 88 now, but this goes back probably 20 years ago. She was 68, and Brian's dad was like 90, 88 or so.
Wow.
And he would go out there. He'd be out there every day, and he'd have speed skates on. And he'd go. And so McCutcheon and I would always talk about that, right? And we're just laughing.
Just to wrap it up, is there any one story that was your favorite from all that you've heard in the last couple of weeks, all that BSing going around?
I don't know if one jumps out, because there's so many quality memories from the group, and certainly my favorite memory is was against Bowling Green, right? When we win the 2-game total goal. I've shared that before. I guess the favorite, because I love hearing the history of the arena, is like Paul and Billy Stewart. And Billy coached UMass Boston and Courage for a long time, and Paul we know, right? Them talking about their grandfather, because the grandfather being again the first American to win a Stanley Cup with the Blackhawks, but talking about being in the building in 1919. It's like wow, here we are in 2025, and they're talking about it 106 years ago. And they know the story from their father, and I don't know if they overlap with their grandfather or not, but it's like, wow, the building would have only been 9 years old then, right? And just talking about it. So for me, that resonated just because, the building was in its early stages.
Get hurt in the game? We tough it out. Feel exhausted? We push on. Feeling down? We pull ourselves up by the bootstraps. But there are times when bootstraps aren't enough. When stress gets to us and we need to talk to someone about what we're really going through. So we're going to reach out because sometimes mental health is not a one-person job. Visit loveyourmindtoday.org. That's loveyourmindtoday.org. Brought to you by the Huntsman Mental Health Institute and the Ad Council.
And welcome back to the College Hockey News Insiders podcast. Hope you enjoyed a little chit-chat with Jim Madigan. Good to catch up with him, a Northeastern lifer, if you will. And interesting stuff. One of the interesting stories he told in there was about growing up in Montreal and seeing when they, when the Forum closed and they sort of passed the torch. They had a whole ceremony there with all the old-timers. So that's where he got the idea to do the same kind of thing with at Matthews, which was kind of cool. So.
Yeah, it was really cool. I was actually pumped that I watched most of it live, but I was broadcasting a game that night. But if you missed that, it's on the Northeastern Athletics YouTube channel, I believe. They posted the whole thing. Right. But it was cool. It was cool. It was really well put together.
Absolutely. And looking ahead to what's going on this week in college hockey, I mean, the games get bigger and bigger, but it doesn't slow down. As just looking from east to west here, Cornell hosting Dartmouth is probably a pretty huge game for those teams. One of Cornell's losses this year was at Dartmouth. So, you got, 8 and 11 in the MPI right now playing each other. That's always going to be a big deal. And we mentioned BU and Providence, a home and home. That's enormous implications there. And New Hampshire at BC. I mean, New Hampshire has shown it can be a pain in the neck. BC needs, a couple wins again to get back in the MPI mix, So, but New Hampshire has not been a pushover this year.
No, they haven't been. They've been good, and that's another one that's got some storyline implications to it too. Ryan Comney, UNH's arguably best forward, best player maybe over the last 2 years, transferred to BC over last offseason. So the first time that he'll face his former team.
Yeah, we've talked about that with Coach Mike Suze before. It's hard for them to keep those kind of guys until they can get some more resources back in the hopper. Who knows when that will be? Hopefully soon, with arena renovations and whatnot. So, still trying to keep up. It's hard. It's hard for those kind of teams. New Hampshire was a dominant national program for many, many years, but that's farther and farther in the rearview window at this rearview mirror, I should say, at this point.
Well, it's going to get harder too. I mean, this was who knows if it will change, but if you pay attention to college sports outside of just college hockey, there's a lot of big schools now that on the revenue sharing component want to get rid of the cap altogether. Right now, schools can share $20.5 million with student athletes every year. There's several prominent people in college athletics who say, we have more money, we want to spend more, get rid of the cap. And Notre Dame's athletic director, I think, is one of the ones leading the charge in that regard. So it's like if it becomes unlimited, yes, the money, I keep saying this to people, the money is not as big as the paydays are not as large in hockey as they are in football and basketball. But if you don't think that the money's making a difference, you're fooling yourself, because it is big time.
Yeah. I mean, old man shouting at the clouds to complain about it again, I guess, but it is what it is.
Yeah, and we can complain about it. Don't get me wrong. I'm fine with that. I'm just saying there's a lot of people that still, I think, believe, it's not making a huge deal in recruiting because we're not talking $4 million per player the way it is for a quarterback in the SEC. Yeah, we're not. But there's teams out there spending money on players, and it's making a difference in recruiting. Every coach that I talk to says that. So,
absolutely. I mean, and a lot of them also will say, look, it's still hockey. You still need 18 players, and the goalie can make a difference, and blah, blah, blah. And that's all true, and then the money is not as big as the other sports. So there are still, it's not as uncompetitive, let's say, but it is getting worse in that regard. And the only ones who downplay that are the teams that have a lot of money.
Well, that's true. And I think it's going to play more of a role. I personally speaking, I think it will play more of a role in the transfer portal than it will in recruiting, because in recruiting, the high-end guys are going to get their money. But what's going to happen is if you have a guy that goes to a smaller school and breaks out, like let's goaltender, because it's the easiest position to do this with. A guy goes to a lower-level hockey school or an ECAC school or an Atlantic Hockey School or a CCHA school and becomes the best goaltender in that league and really plays well at a smaller school, and then I'll use the Big Ten because they have the most money. A Big Ten school needs a goaltender. You got a proven commodity who's proven he could do it at the college level. I don't think it's uncommon for those types of guys to get offers of 50 to 100 grand. You want to transfer? And it's going to become an issue, I think, with player retention, because there's schools that just can't afford that. So the second a player gets a monetary offer like that, it's more than likely going to be gone.
Yep, that's the case. Or as they say, that's the facts, Jack. So, and let's get off of that before we get too nauseous.
I took a side road there.
No, it's good. We definitely have to talk about it. Just I know it as it gets a little crazier and crazier. It it gets annoying sometimes. You know what I mean? So we gotta get back to the hockey, and it is what it is. But we glossed over the CCHA earlier, so we should talk about that now, because there is a big game this weekend, although, again, just the one, Augustana, which is sitting 14 in the MPI right now, will play at Minnesota State. And I think because, they have 9 teams in the league now, there's a couple weekends where you're just playing the one game. They had that earlier in the year against St. Thomas as well. And so, I guess there's a few teams you play only 3 times instead of 4. Minnesota State coming off getting swept by Michigan Tech. And all of a sudden, Michigan Tech is 18. 18 in the MPI. So we've talked about how there's a few teams that can be battling here for NCAA bids. I'm still not sure if they'll get 2 in. But there are a lot of teams hovering around right there.
Yeah, there are. And there's even some kind of around the bubble area, too.
Minnesota State was there, and then they lost to Augustana, right? And then they lost to Michigan Tech, so they've kind of slipped a little bit.
Yeah, they're down to 21. But, and again, I don't know enough about the math to know how big of a gap this is. But, I look at the difference between Minnesota State at 21 and Boston College at 15 is less than a point when it comes to their NPI number. So it seems to me that gap is not very big. But again, I don't really...
Yeah.
Half an NPI point, what does that equate to? It's hard to say, I guess, because I don't know yet.
Yeah, we're still learning that, as we go here, how much fluctuation there is. We kind of had a handle on the pairwise, how much things would fluctuate from one win to another win, and then, we're still wrapping our heads around that right now. So.
The difference, for people that don't know, the difference top to bottom is basically 20. Michigan's NPI number is 60.1. St. Lawrence is 40. So you're talking about 20 points that separate the absolute top from the absolute bottom, but it's hard to quantify, how far apart are the teams that are 0.5 points apart? Is that, I think it's pretty close, because we saw this weekend with BC, they lost 2 games that actually went up because they were bunched up with some other schools that had, quote unquote, worse losses. So it feels like that's pretty close. It feels like Minnesota State with one good weekend, depending on what happens with the teams around them, of course. But it feels like if Minnesota State has one good weekend, especially, this weekend, there's only one game, but they're playing Augustana, who's ranked pretty high, they could get back into that bubble mix pretty quickly.
Yeah, 15 through 23 is separated by less than 1 point.
Yeah.
To what you're saying. And then there's a little bit of a gap to Miami at 24, and a gap from Boston College up to Augustana at 14. So, it probably is indicative of how volatile that area is going to be. I mean, we've seen, BU climb just with a couple wins, from 25 to 17 and whatnot. So, that area.
I've seen it with other teams too. Everybody knows I cover Merrimack day to day, and they had gotten themselves up to 30 going into the weekend, lost 2 games to UMass and dropped to 40. And I had some people that read my stuff on the Merrimack side of things that were like, how do they drop 10 spots with just 2 losses? And I'm like, well, look at the number. Like, again, we're talking a fraction of a point that separates 30 or the 30, now it's 33 to 40. Like, that's why. It's because there's not a lot separating those schools, it seems.
We'd be remiss if we don't at least mention St. Thomas, now 8 in a row after sweeping Bemidji State as well. And they were definite team of the week candidate material right there. But, I mean, Bemidji's a solid team, and St. Thomas took care of them 5-1 and 3-2. And so, now they play at Lake Superior. Maybe they keep that rolling. I mean, St. Thomas is, 13 in the – actually, I didn't even realize that. They leapfrogged Augustana there. So that is huge. And can they make the NCAA?
They can now, yeah.
Yeah, they can.
Yeah, they are. Something happened with that. I don't recall. It was like last.
Yeah, they moved up the timeline on them.
Yeah, they moved up the timeline, so they're now a full-fledged Division I member.
That's right. So they can make it, and why not? It's been a while for Rico Blasi, their head coach, who was a perennial NCAA tournament team for a long time as a head coach at Miami. What they made? I'm looking at it right now. They made it 4 or 5, they made like 9 years in a row and 11 out of 13, something like that. But
Crazy.
The last one was 2015. So trying to get back with another school. There you go. Just the games to look forward to, and it's going to get crazier and crazier as we get to February and the Bean Pot and the Michigan State weekend and all that other stuff. So a little bit of a respite here. Just enjoy the games for a couple weeks, and we'll see you then.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's edition of the College Hockey News Insiders Podcast. To submit your listener questions, please send them to @CHN News on X. And for the best college hockey content around, including features, the CHN Team of the Week, stats, rankings, and so much more, visit us at collegehockeynews.com. Until next time, we hope you enjoy all of this week's great on-ice action, and we'll be back to break it down on our next edition. For Adam Woden and Mike McMahon, this has been the College Hockey News Insiders Podcast.